And welcome to an introduction to worldviews and apologetics. This is session number 1. We're going to introduce these concepts today. We're having some technology issues, which is always wonderful. But the technology is, in fact, allowing us to get together in Italy, in the Philippines, and here in the United States. This is a worldwide joining of friends to study together. I'm Dr. John McMath, and I welcome my friends in Italy and the Philippines to this session. Okay, I'm calling this an introduction to worldviews and apologetics, and I'm going to see if I can make the screen work. Yes, okay, there it goes, and there it comes through. This is a survey of the ways that people try to explain everything. And when I say everything, that's exactly what I mean. A worldview is an explanation of everything there is, and an attempt to make sense of it. And the way we talk to people with differing worldviews is it's a set of methods within our obligation to do evangelism. Jesus said, having gone into all the world, make disciples. But it's very difficult to make disciples of people who don't understand what you're talking about, or who are coming from a different point of view. The worldview is the way that people have chosen to look at the world. Often they're born with this. That is, they grow up in a broader culture that holds a worldview. And what we're dealing with is the aftermath of this. Some people don't even realize that they have a worldview, but everyone does. It's impossible to live a life without a worldview. So everyone has one. The distinctions between the worldviews are profound. This is why it sometimes feels like we're on a different channel, that we're talking to people or listening to people, and we're speaking a different language, or we're on a different radio wavelength or something. We tend to talk past each other. Understanding worldviews allows us to put the Christian message into a format that people can actually understand. And that's the point of this whole study. We're learning how to communicate the gospel, often with people who are inherently hostile to the gospel message. And we'll all find, no matter where we live in the world, that most of us, most of the time when we're not in church, are surrounded by people who have a very different way of looking at things. So what we're going to start off with is a survey of the ways that people try to explain everything. I'm going to try to explain the 7 different worldviews that are logically possible. And we'll talk about the religions that flow from those worldviews, because actually a worldview is not the same as a religion. But there are only this limited number. And once you understand that there's only so many ways to slice this cake, it's easier to handle it. And that's where we're going to go. Once we've surveyed the 7 ways of looking at the world, which will take us a little while, we'll start developing the the methods that are necessary to actually communicate with people. This isn't, of course, an evangelism so much as it's a set of ways of answering the kinds of questions that people ask. When people are coming at the world from a different point of view, they ask predictable questions about Christianity. They have predictable problems understanding what Christianity means. As I've been teaching for 50 years or so, and honestly and truly, I don't get any new questions. I get the same old ones. Okay. Just had 3 more folks show up. Wonderful. Good to see everybody who we got here. Yeah, the folks are coming in. As you're finding your way in, welcome. It's good to see everybody. Sorry that the links weren't self-evident. I'm going to try to fix this by next time. Anyway, here we go. So some beginning thoughts on this whole worldviews thing. See if I can find my cursor. Yeah, some beginning thoughts. Okay, a worldview is exactly what it sounds like. It's a way of viewing the world. And by world, I mean the whole of reality, everything that exists, whether that existence is physical or supernatural. A worldview is a way of making sense of everything that we see. It's the way one views everything, the whole of reality. It's a set of ideas that help an individual make sense of all the things that he sees. We could think of this as a method for connecting dots. We've all seen something like this. There's 4 dots. What's the best way to connect the dots? Well, you might think a square would be ideal. And that's easy. You just draw straight lines between the dots. But maybe you think a different way. Maybe you think outside the traditional box, and you can connect these dots with a circle. Or perhaps you can make a triangle. It's the same 4 dots, but the connections are different. The differing worldviews are different ways of connecting the dots. People who come at the world with a different worldview are going to interpret it differently. Simple as that. It really isn't all that. It isn't all that difficult a concept. Some have compared the whole worldview thing to a set of colored glasses. So if you wear red tinted glasses, everything looks kind of red. If your glasses are blue, everything looks kind of blue. So if you talk to an Orthodox Jew about the story of the Exodus, he will agree with you that this was a miracle. It's a divine intervention to save Israel from Egypt. And we Christians have that in common with Jews. A naturalist, or perhaps an atheist, who rejects the very idea that there is a God who can do miracles, would look at the same story and perhaps deny that the event ever happened at all. But let's say he agrees that some kind of an event actually happened. He would view it from a purely natural point of view, maybe explain it as a mass hallucination, that all these hundreds of thousands of Israelites crossing the Red Sea were actually zoned out on some kind of an Egyptian drug or whatever. Perhaps it's a series of natural coincidences. So the water turned to blood, and the death of the firstborn and the crossing of the Red Sea were actually purely natural events that the Israelites at the time mistook as a miracle. But he certainly won't think that God intervened in the world and did a miracle, because by definition, the glasses he's looking through tell him that that's not possible. He is looking through his blue-colored glasses, and there are no gods in this worldview. So two people looking at exactly the same data come to radically different conclusions. They interpret the data differently. But this isn't a perfect illustration of the worldview. You can take your glasses off at night, but a worldview is continuous. You even dream in your worldview. Glasses color the viewpoint, but a worldview actually shapes values. And for that reason, it also shapes behavior. If you believe that man is created in the image of God, then your relationship with other people in your own family or people in your community and the world at large, is going to be different than if you believe that man is just nicely evolved slime mold with no purpose in the universe. It's entirely different. It leads to different behavior. And the kinds of radically differing behavioral codes that we find in the world go back to a difference in worldview. Okay, glasses, you put on a set of blue glasses and they're inflexible. It's going to be that way all the time. You don't change it, you don't alter a set of glasses, but a worldview can adapt. Sometimes it has to be altered to fit undeniable reality. Evolutionists, for example, who are within the atheist worldview. Evolutionists have changed their position since the time of Darwin, actually multiple times. As new evidence comes up, they realize that their theory is not complex enough to handle the reality, and so they change it. And worldviews tend to change. This even happens with Christians. The fundamental worldview doesn't change, but our own understanding of how we see the world develops as we grow. And we do, in fact, learn things. Okay, let's see here. Where am I going? Is it possible for a worldview to change radically? Yes, yeah, the worldview can certainly be changed. In religion, we call this conversion. In the scientific world, we call this a paradigm shift. It's not something that happens regularly. It isn't something that happens easily. When a radical change in worldview happens to someone, that's a revolutionary event. Back in the late Middle Ages, there's a character by the name of Copernicus. This is him looking at the then current model of the universe, with the Earth in the middle and a series of spheres with sun and moon and stars and planets rotating in a variety of directions. And what Copernicus figured out was that the Earth is not the center, but is rather one planet circling a star, which itself is just one of many stars. The idea that Copernicus had was literally revolutionary in that it changed a fundamental scientific worldview, an explanation of reality on the largest possible scale. So this Copernican revolution was resisted. Copernicus himself was condemned as a heretic. The church at that time was quite anti-scientific, in spite of the fact that most of the scientists of the late Middle Ages and into the Renaissance were in fact Christians. They believed in an orderly universe. Copernicus believed that the universe was orderly enough that by making careful observations, he could discover God's structure of the universe. And of course, he was right. God is a very orderly character. And when we find elegant order in the universe, we're simply discovering the footprints of God, the fingerprints of God all over it. Here's a very careful designer. And we see that Copernicus merely publicized his observations, and that got him in terrible trouble. And it took a while for scientists of that day and on into the period that we call the Enlightenment to realize that Copernicus was right. And that the old Ptolemaic idea, the Egyptian idea of an Earth-centered universe is simply wrong. It doesn't work. Now, the same thing happens with other kinds of worldviews. The scientific worldview is just one of many. So in science, a model can often be expressed mathematically. And a mathematical model of reality forms a framework for interpretation. It allows an observer a simple way to connect the dots of all of the evidence that is seen. So here's some calculus for evaluating the integral of a curved surface. And I was never very good at this stuff, but this is a picture of that. And different scientists use differing models, and they argue about which model of light or gravity or nuclear fission handles the facts better. The worldview is different than a scientific model. In a scientific model, we're trying to model one specific thing, like gravity. And the theory of relativity handles that okay, not too bad. The changes take place over time. Theories of nuclear fission handle the data and the reality of things reasonably well. And so that continues and goes on. But unlike the scientific model, the worldview is what we call macro. It's an attempt to provide an interpretation for everything. So for the most part, philosophical worldviews can't be reduced to a mathematical equation. Probably it's maybe it be illustrated a different way. Look at this puzzle. What we have here is a many hundreds of piece puzzle, and you can see that somebody has begun putting this puzzle together in the upper right. It's mostly background pieces, that off pink background. What a terrible project to try to get into. But you can kind of tell which parts are sand and which parts are the rock on the left and which part is waterfall and which part is lake. So you start with those pieces. You're looking at the worldview is like this. It's like the picture on the box. And when you look at an individual puzzle piece, the picture on the box gives you some clues how to identify the individual parts. So when we're living our lives, a worldview allows us to make sense of the details. The worldview is in that way indispensable, because otherwise we'd be all the time completely confused by all these details, and none of it would make any sense. So way of looking at it. So a summary here. A worldview is a mental structure that allows a person to mold the stuff of experience. So all the individual details can be fit into a single large picture. It's like the plot that holds all the details of a storyline together. It's like the pattern used to cut the cloth of life experience. There's a lot of ways of saying this, but the bottom line is the worldview makes a world of difference in how one views the world. I mean, what do you see over there? That's the Earth as viewed from the moon. A different worldview will have a different point of view. Okay, so if we ask the question then, what are the major worldviews? Historically and logically, there are 7 major worldviews. Only 4 of these have major modern representations. Okay, so that's simpler. This is not nearly so overwhelming as you might think. Some people think there ought to be thousands of worldviews so that we could define everybody, and everybody can have their own individual personal worldview. But in fact, that's not possible. A real worldview is logically different from all of the others. No one can consistently hold more than one worldview, because the central premises of each worldview are opposed to all of the others. So there is no common ground, for example, between pantheism and theism. They're simply different, and there's nothing in common. No one can consistently hold more than one. The logic doesn't allow it. If one worldview turns out to be true, then all of the others are false. And this is simple logic. It's the law of non-contradiction. 2 categorically opposite positions can't both be true in logic. Now, there are some worldviews that deny the operation of logic, that just makes it more fun, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with that right now. So what are the major worldviews? Well, we're going to start off here with ultimate reality, and I've got a bunch of lines on the thing that you'll understand where it's going here in a second. So what do we do with ultimate reality? Well, we can say that in ultimate reality, there is no God. Okay, that's one of the logical options. The ultimate reality is that whatever exists without God. This position we call atheism. An atheist is a person who believes that there is no God. In the middle position, we could say that there is one God. And another position holds that there are many gods. These are the 3 logical possibilities. Let's look at the right-hand side. If there are many gods, these many gods must be either infinite or finite. Many infinite gods is actually a logical contradiction, but it's one of the logical possibilities, but nobody takes that position, so we don't have a name for it. If there are many gods and they are finite, if you've got lots and lots of little gods, that's called polytheism, from a Latin term that means many. So many godism. You've got lots and lots of gods. Okay. If there is only one God, the first question to ask about this one God is he finite, limited in some sense, or infinite, unlimited? if the God you're talking about has a bunch of omnis in his list of attributes, then he is infinite. If he is limited in any sense, then he is a finite God. And there are some worldviews that have a finite God. These are called panentheism and finite godism. If this finite God of yours is identified with the world, if he is living in this world as like the soul in a body, that's called panentheism. And we'll look at panentheism for a little bit. I don't find it very interesting, but we'll look a little bit at that. If he is not identified with the world, you've got this finite little God who is completely separated from the world and isn't the world, then this is called finite godism. And again, there are very, very few people actually hold to either of these views. They are held primarily by, well, frankly, nutcase philosophers. Okay, so most everybody who holds that there is one God holds to an infinite God. Okay, if this infinite God is identified with the world, then we have what is known as pantheism. This is Eastern religion like Hinduism and Buddhism. If this one infinite God is not identified with the world, he is something different from the world, then we ask the questions, would you like that infinite transcendent God with or without miracles? Okay, a God who doesn't do miracles results in a worldview we call deism. If this infinite God beyond the world also acts in the world in miraculous or supernatural ways, then that is theism. This is the idea of an infinite God who is both beyond the universe and in the universe and active in both. So if we count all of these up, there are actually 8 here, but there's no position for an infinite polytheism. So we've got 7 possibilities that are really out there. Let me go through these in a little more detail so that we can maybe understand on paper what we're talking about. Theism is an infinite God who is both beyond and in the universe. So there's the world, the universe. God is definitely beyond, but he includes the world. The idea of a God who is infinitely large and yet who is active in the world is key to traditional Christianity, but also to Judaism and Islam. Muslims believe that there is one God who created the universe and who has acted in time and space in miraculous ways. So Islam counts as a monotheistic worldview. So as you can see, there are some significant differences between worldview positions within theism. The opposite of theism is atheism. This makes the world its own circle, and there's absolutely nothing else. There is no God. There never has been any kind of a God. The world is all there is. The material universe is normally understood to be eternal for logical reasons. If you agree that the material universe has a beginning, then you have to come up with a cause. And the material universe could not have caused itself. Even the atheists know that. So typically they argue that the universe itself, the material world, is infinite and eternal in some sense. This has been the secular worldview since roughly the 17th century. With the Reformation, there also came a shifting in the scientific and the philosophical world, which led to a movement we call the Enlightenment. One of the results of the Enlightenment was the popularization of atheism. Now, of course, there have been atheists all the way back into the early days of philosophy, but this became a popular way of understanding the world and continues to be. In the modern day, you're going to run into lots and lots of atheists. By the way, atheism requires an argument. There are a lot of people who simply live as though there were no God. They've never given it any thought. They were probably not taught anything one way or the other. They're ignorant. They don't know. The Bible calls this individual a fool. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. The book of Proverbs speaks of the naive, the fool, and the mocker. The mocker is the one who has come up with an argument for the non-existence of God. And anybody who has worked through an argument to prove to himself that there is no God is an atheist in this definition. And the simple fool who's just never thought about it and has chosen to live as though there is no God is still going to hell. And we still need to share the gospel with him, but he hasn't thought about it. A fool is a bit easier to deal with than a mocker. Anyway, so atheism, the position of the mocker, there is nothing out there. No God exists within or beyond the universe. The cosmos is all that is, was, or ever shall be. It is self-sustaining. Atheism is a view held by lots of famous people. Karl Marx, the inventor of communism, Friedrich Nietzsche, who is the patron saint of Nazism, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher who is the founder of what we call existentialism, all were militant atheists. Okay, let's look at some other views that are a little farther away. Pantheism identifies the world with God. So the world is God, and God is the universe. They are a single circle. Pantheism is sometimes called monism, from mono, one. There is one who is all. And when we start reading pantheistic literature, it all comes back to this essential basis. Pantheism is the idea that there simply is no God beyond the universe. The creator and the creation are simply two different ways of seeing the same one reality. God is the universe is God. There's only one reality, not many different ones. And we find this in Hinduism, Zen Buddhism, the New Age movement. If you watched Star Wars, the Force is the energy field that gives the Jedi his strength. That's pantheism. So in India, in China, the traditional religions there of Hinduism and Buddhism are the primary pantheistic systems. At a very, very different outcome in practice than theism. simply because of this worldview. With the pantheistic worldview, everything that is has to be explained in terms of the one, which gives us a problem with good and evil. And in Eastern philosophy, we think of the yin and the yang. I'm not going to draw that circle here, but a circle with a kind of an S shape in the middle. You've got one whole, and there's a yin and a yang, and they're equal and opposite. And there's one that's good and one that's evil. And the evil is just a part of the one, and the good is just a part of the one. And you need to live your life with indifference as to how things turn out. So if you end up murdering your sister, that's just the way things turned out. You need to live with that. It's a different way of thinking. It's an entirely different way of thinking. A pantheist is not a theist in any sense of the term. So it's a very strange thing, very different thing. And it's also gotten very popular in the West. We find a great deal of pantheism going on in so-called modern Western countries, in Europe and in America. Pantheism has become very popular. And so we'll spend quite a bit of time with pantheism. Panentheism is a logical alternative that claims that God is in the universe in much the same way that a mind is in a body. It doesn't claim that God is identical to the world, but rather that it's a kind of like the world is a body for God, or that God is the infinite potential pole of the world. So the physical universe exists, but God is growing and evolving and always becoming and kind of dragging the universe along with him. The notion of panentheism is sometimes called bipolar godism, or evolutionary godism. It's the idea that the God is continually changing. In theology, this is called process theology, and is popular amongst left-wing theologians who want to pretend they're doing theology without actually dealing with the Bible. Panentheism is a minority view. I made the note here that it's only held by some philosophers who do manage to teach young people. They teach in universities, and so their views are in fact dangerous. Some big names in panentheism: Alfred North Whitehead, Charles Hartshorne, and Schubert Ogden. All relatively well known in philosophic circles. Outside of that fairly narrow world, most of us have never heard of these guys and usually don't run into panentheism. The alternative to panentheism is a thing called deism. And deism was popular several hundred years ago in the 18th century, but it was finally dealt with by, well, frankly, good Christian apologetics. This view holds that God created the world, but then walked away from it. We sometimes call this the view of Deus absconditus, the God who absconds. He throws the world into being and sets some rules for its operation and then walks away. The main principle of deism is that God doesn't interact with the world. Certainly never does miracles. So revelation, the resurrection, the crossing of the Red Sea, all of that sort of thing is impossible. There is no heaven or hell because God has walked away and he simply doesn't care what goes on in the world. The deist primarily took his position back in the day because looking at the evidence, it was becoming more and more clear that there is design and order in the universe. So the deist is an atheist who wants to somehow explain the orderliness of the universe. So he invents a God that's small enough that he can kick him out of this universe. And unfortunately, that's not the God of reality. And the deist is simply wrong. There have been some fairly famous deists in the United States. We've got some founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, who were in fact deists. They were what we call warm deists. Yes, that they actually didn't believe that God had just walked away from everything. They still believed that prayer was a good thing, that going to church was necessary. Deism was never particularly consistent. There are today a few deists still around. They tend to be highly educated people who are well aware of the orderliness of the universe. They tend to be scientifically minded. So I don't despise the deist. Nevertheless, the position is wrong. Okay, then the one of the last we're going to look at, second to the last, is a thing called finite godism. This is one that you probably never heard of. This is the view that there is a finite God who is both beyond and in the universe. Finite means this is a very limited God. It's like theism, except that the God who is in and beyond the universe is not infinite. He is not all powerful. He's not all good. He's quite limited in his nature and his power. It's one of the logical possibilities, but it's a position that's held only by a few, again, nutcase philosophers. William James is probably the most famous 19th century philosopher, and Peter Bertocci and Harold Kushner are a couple of modern writers in this particular area, but frankly, they haven't gotten a lot of traction. Then there is polytheism. This is a very, very ancient way of looking at the universe. Polytheism says there's more than one God, and they are mostly little. No one God takes care of everything. There's lots and lots of little gods, and sometimes they fight with each other. And sometimes two of them get together and beget lots and lots of other gods. Polytheism tends to be inconsistent and primitive. So the old primitive fertility religions like the Babylonian religion and Egyptian religion and Greek and Roman religion with Baal and Ishtar and Astarte and El and all of the ancient gods tend to be nature gods. They tend to be related to the fertility of the earth. And the ancient fertility religions tended to be gross, crude, and really not worth careful study. And most of those died out for that reason. We still find polytheism in primitive places. And so if you go off into unreached people groups, and there aren't that many anymore, but if you go off into the hill country of India or parts of Africa or South America or the Pacific, like Papua New Guinea and parts of Indonesia, you will find polytheistic tribal groups. They're out there. It's more likely that you'll run into polytheism among modern, more religious systems like Mormonism. The Mormons actually believe that each and every one of them can become a god. They get to inhabit their own little world with all of the women that they've married spiritually, and raise a whole bunch of spirit children on their own little earth for all of eternity. So Mormonism is polytheistic. That's an American religion, one of the few genuinely American religions. Environmentalism is another one that is very popular in the West. Environmentalism holds that there's something sacred about the earth itself and about each and every individual animal. The only thing not sacred are people. And of course, there is no God outside of the world. Environmentalists tend to think of themselves as atheists, but in fact, they are treating all of the elements of the earth as their own little gods. So polytheism. In the modern world, we run into these folks all the time, and they tend to be superficial. The view that they have taken primarily for practical reasons. And it makes them interesting, but also difficult. Okay, this is where we're going to stop for the day. When we come back on next Wednesday, we're going to look at theism, which is the view that there's more to this world than just the world itself. There's also a creator, and he's infinite. And this is going to take us some time. So probably next Wednesday, we'll spend our whole time looking at the varieties of and the background of theism. That's the position that we take. So I think we all know this fairly well. And what I'm going to be looking at is some of the details and the characteristics, so that as we move along, we'll have a sound basis for comparison. Anyway, that's where we're going to end for the day. Let me see if I can make this work. Where is my thing? I should have yes, it is. There it is. I should be able to stop the share. There we go. Sometimes it is difficult to make everything work. Have I got people waiting? Oh, I'm sorry. I got somebody still waiting to get in. Sorry about that. Okay, folks, sorry about the technical glitches. Next Wednesday, we'll have a link out nice and early, and it will be the correct number. Thank you for coming. It's good to see everybody. Could hardly wait till we can all get back together again. Okay, and anybody who'd like to say bye-bye. Love you guys. We're going to see you next time.
Ciao, Dr. Jeff.
Ciao, Dr. Jeff. Grazie.
Ciao, ciao.
Prossimo.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao a tutti.
Love you guys. Bye-bye, Don.
Ciao.
See you, man.
Ciao, Dr. Tim.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, Brother Tom.
Bye-bye, Oscar.